I'm standing outside the Golden Oak Country Club at 6:47 p.m., my hand trembling on the brass door handle, knowing that in the next 60 seconds, the version of me they've always known will meet the version I've always been. What happens when the most important people in your life see you, really see you, for the very first time? This is that moment. This is that story. But what I didn't expect was that the first person to notice me wouldn't be David. It would be someone whose reaction would freeze me in place and threaten to shatter everything I'd worked so hard to build. As I confidently opened the door, I had no idea that this night would test not just my courage, but my family's capacity for love in ways none of us could have imagined. Stepping back into my apartment at 11:45 a.m., I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. My hair was perfectly styled, catching the light, flawless makeup that enhanced every feature, burgundy nails that spoke of sophistication and confidence. But now came the real test. Choosing the perfect outfit for one of the most important evenings of my life. My closet had been secretly transformed over the past 2 years. Hidden behind my everyday clothes was a carefully curated collection of feminine pieces I'd bought online, each one representing a small act of courage, a tiny step toward this very moment. Tonight called for something special, something that would honor both the celebration and my own personal milestone. I selected a midnight blue wrap dress that I'd purchased months ago. The fabric was luxurious, a silk blend that draped beautifully and moved with grace. The color complemented my new makeup perfectly, and the classic cut was elegant enough for a formal family celebration while still feeling authentically me. The accessories came next. Simple pearl earrings that caught the light when I moved my head, a vintage clutch purse in deep navy that perfectly matched the dress. Each piece felt like armor, protecting me as I prepared to step into uncharted territory. Standing before my full-length mirror, I took a deep breath and really looked at myself. The transformation was complete, and it was breathtaking. This wasn't a costume or a disguise. This was me. But what if my family didn't see the woman I saw in the mirror? What if they only saw a stranger? The drive to Golden Oak Country Club felt both eternal and instantaneous. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I navigated through the early evening traffic, my mind racing between excitement and terror. Every red light gave me a moment to check my makeup in the rearview mirror, to adjust my hair, to remind myself that I deserved to take up space in the world as my authentic self. The country club sat on a hill overlooking the city, its classical architecture and manicured grounds speaking to the kind of elegance my family had always appreciated. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I could see other guests arriving, men in dark suits, women in cocktail dresses, everyone dressed to honor David's special milestone. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Uncle Robert's distinctive silver Mercedes was already parked near the entrance. Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, the family patriarch, the man who still used terms like the way things ought to be and proper family values. If anyone was going to cause problems tonight, it would be him. The valet attendant approached my car with professional courtesy, opening my door and offering his hand to help me out. "Good evening, miss," he said with a smile, and something inside my chest fluttered at being addressed so naturally as the woman I was presenting as. "Are you here for the Golden Jubilee celebration?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady despite the goosebump I had felt earlier. "The Davidson party." As I walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking confidently on the marble walkway, I became aware of other guests glancing my way. But these weren't looks of suspicion or curiosity. They were the kind of appreciative glances women receive when they're well-dressed and carry themselves with confidence. What I didn't know was that, inside, Uncle Robert had already spotted my name on the guest list and was asking questions that would set the tone for everything that was about to unfold. The Magnolia Ballroom was everything I'd expected and more. Elegant round tables dressed in crisp white linens and adorned with centerpieces of white roses and gold accents filled the space. A small band played jazz standards in one corner, while a bar along the far wall served cocktails to guests who mingled with drinks in hand. And there, in the center of it all, was my family. But something felt different the moment I stepped inside. I spotted David immediately. He stood near the bar, resplendent in a charcoal gray suit, but his expression looked tense as Uncle Robert spoke to him in hushed, urgent tones. Elena stood beside them, her face showing the kind of discomfort that comes from being caught in the middle of family drama. My parents sat at what was clearly the family table, but I could see from their body language that they were already aware something was happening. My mother's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her telltale sign of stress, while my father's jaw was set in the way it got when he was preparing for conflict. For a moment, I stood at the entrance to the ballroom, taking in the scene and realizing that my arrival wasn't going to be the surprise I'd planned. Somehow, word had already begun to spread. What I didn't know was that Uncle Robert already had his own idea of how this night should go, and I wasn't part of it. I smoothed my dress, checked my posture, and took the first step into what felt less like a celebration and more like a battlefield. The first person to notice me wasn't David, as I'd expected. It wasn't even my parents. It was Uncle Robert, who turned from his conversation and locked eyes with me across the crowded ballroom. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and then something that looked uncomfortably close to disgust. And then he began walking toward me with purposeful strides that made everyone in his path step aside. This was not how I'd imagined this moment would begin. Uncle Robert reached me before anyone else could intercede, his face flushed with what I recognized as barely controlled anger. He stopped just close enough that our conversation would be private, but far enough away to make his disapproval obvious to anyone watching. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he said in a voice that was low but carried the kind of authority he'd wielded over family gatherings for decades. Before I could respond, David appeared at my side, his face showing a mixture of protection, curiosity, and surprise. "Uncle Robert, please don't do this here." "Don't do what?" Uncle Robert's voice was getting louder now, drawing attention from nearby guests. "Don't ask why Michael thinks this circus act belongs at a family celebration." The word, circus, hung in the air like a slap, and I felt something inside me crumble and rebuild simultaneously. This was exactly what I'd feared, but somehow facing it head-on felt less terrifying than I'd imagined. "I'm still your nephew," I said quietly, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm still family." Elena stepped forward then, her voice calm but firm. "Uncle Robert, perhaps we should." "No," he interrupted, his attention now focused entirely on me. "I want to understand what this is supposed to accomplish. What statement you think you're making at your brother's expense?" The confrontation was drawing more attention now. Other family members were turning to look, conversations were stopping, and I could feel the energy in the room shifting towards something uncomfortable and tense. My mother appeared beside David, her face pale but determined. "Robert, that's enough." "Is it?" Uncle Robert turned to face the growing circle of family members. "Are we all just going to pretend this is normal? That this is appropriate?" The silence after his words felt like it could last forever, but someone was about to break it. I realized that this moment, this exact moment, would define not just my relationship with my family, but how they related to each other going forward. It was my father who broke the silence, stepping forward with the kind of quiet authority that had always made him the family peacemaker. "Robert," he said calmly, "this is my child, and they are welcome at this celebration exactly as they are." The word, child, instead of son, wasn't lost on anyone present, and I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it almost brought me to tears. Uncle Robert's face reddened further. "Your child is making a spectacle. The only person making a spectacle," Elena interrupted with ice in her voice, "is you." Aunt Ruth, my mother's progressive sister, moved to stand beside Elena. "I think they look absolutely beautiful. And brave." My cousin Sarah appeared next, linking her arm through mine in a gesture of solidarity that was both protective and defiant. Anyone who has a problem with my cousin being happy can take it up with me. But Uncle Robert wasn't finished. "This is exactly what's wrong with the world today. No respect for tradition, no understanding of proper. Uncle Robert." David's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "This is my birthday celebration, and this is my sibling. If you can't respect both of those facts, then perhaps you should leave." The ultimatum hung in the air like a challenge. Other family members were now clearly choosing sides, some moving closer to show support, others stepping back in obvious discomfort. Uncle Frank, Robert's younger brother, looked torn between family loyalty and his own uncertainty. Uncle Robert looked around the circle of faces, realizing that the support he'd expected wasn't materializing the way he'd hoped. After a long, tense moment, he straightened his tie and addressed the group. "I came here to celebrate 50 years of David's life. I didn't come here for whatever this is supposed to be." He turned back to me, his voice cold. "When you're ready to rejoin this family as the person you actually are, you'll be welcome. Until then." He left the sentence unfinished, turned on his heel, and walked toward the exit, leaving a wake of uncomfortable silence behind him. For a moment after Uncle Robert's departure, nobody moved. The confrontation had been so public, so raw, that everyone seemed frozen in its aftermath. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and suddenly uncertain about everything I'd been so confident about just minutes before. Then my mother stepped forward and did something that surprised everyone. She pulled me into the kind of fierce, protective hug that she'd given me as a child whenever I was hurt or scared. "I'm so sorry," she whispered in my ear. "You don't deserve that. You don't deserve any of that." Her embrace broke the spell that had held everyone frozen, and suddenly I was surrounded by family members, offering comfort, support, and their own quiet apologies for Uncle Robert's behavior. David was visibly shaken, his special day now marked by family conflict he'd never anticipated. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I never imagined he would." "It's not your fault," I assured him, though my own voice was trembling. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen." Elena took charge with the kind of grace that made me understand why David had married her. "Well, he's gone now," she said practically. "And we're all still here. So let's celebrate what really matters. Family that loves each other unconditionally." Uncle Frank, who had remained silent during the confrontation, approached me hesitantly. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that Robert doesn't speak for all of us. You're family, and you always will be." His words meant more than he probably realized, coming from someone who had always been close to Uncle Robert and shared many of his traditional views. My younger cousins, who had watched the drama unfold with wide eyes, began asking questions that were innocent but profound. Why was Uncle Robert so angry? "You look really pretty. Is he going to come back?" Their acceptance was so immediate, so uncomplicated, that it reminded everyone present what unconditional love actually looked like. But I could see that some family members were still processing, still uncertain. The evening had taken a turn none of us had expected, and the celebration felt forever changed by the conflict that had erupted. As the initial shock of the confrontation wore off, I realized I had a choice to make. I could let Uncle Robert's reaction define this evening, could allow his anger and disapproval to overshadow everything else, or I could choose to focus on the love and acceptance that surrounded me from everyone who had stayed. "You know what?" I said, addressing the family members who had gathered around me. "Uncle Robert is entitled to his feelings, but I'm not going to let his inability to accept me ruin David's celebration or my own happiness." David's face lit up with admiration and relief. "That's exactly the attitude I hoped you'd have." The band, which had stopped playing during the confrontation, began a new song, something soft and celebratory that helped shift the energy back toward joy rather than conflict. Elena raised her champagne glass in an impromptu toast. "To family," she said, "and to the courage it takes to be yourself." As glasses were raised around the circle, I felt the evening begin to transform from something marked by conflict into something defined by love's triumph over fear. The women in my family, my mother, Elena, Aunt Ruth, Sarah, and my younger cousins, began to include me in their conversations in a way that felt organic and healing. They complimented my dress, asked about my makeup, and treated me with the same warmth and sisterly affection they'd always shown each other. "We need to go shopping together," Elena said, linking her arm through mine. "I know the perfect boutiques for your style." My cousin Sarah was equally enthusiastic. "There's this amazing spa downtown that does the most incredible facials. We should plan a girls' day." These invitations weren't just social pleasantries. They were genuine expressions of acceptance and inclusion. For the first time in my life, I was being invited into the feminine spaces of my family, the conversations and activities I'd always observed from the outside. The men in my family, while perhaps less immediately demonstrative, showed their acceptance in their own ways. David kept checking on me throughout the evening, making sure I was comfortable. My father made a point of introducing me to his friends with obvious pride. Uncle Frank, after his initial hesitation, began making an effort to include me in conversations in ways that felt natural and affirming. But I was also aware of the empty spaces, the family members who had been made uncomfortable by the confrontation and had chosen to leave rather than navigate the new dynamics. Uncle Robert's departure had given others permission to retreat as well, and the celebration felt smaller, though perhaps more intimate as a result. As the evening reached its crescendo, David called for everyone's attention to make his birthday toast. The room fell quiet as family and friends gathered around, champagne glasses raised, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that hadn't been present earlier. 50 years, David began, his voice carrying across the ballroom with the confidence of someone who had found his footing again after an unexpected challenge. 50 years of life, love, family, and friendship. 50 years of learning what really matters in this world. He paused, his eyes finding mine across the room. Tonight didn't go exactly as I planned. None of us expected to face the kind of challenge that tested not just our family bonds, but our capacity for love itself. The room was completely silent now, everyone aware that this toast was about much more than a birthday celebration. "But you know what I learned tonight?" David continued, his voice growing stronger. "I learned that real family isn't about everyone thinking the same way or agreeing on everything. Real family is about choosing love over fear, acceptance over judgment, celebration over condemnation." He raised his glass higher, looking directly at me. "Tonight, my siblings showed incredible courage, by being authentically themselves. And those of you who are still here showed incredible courage by choosing love over fear. That's the kind of family I'm proud to belong to. The applause that followed was different from typical celebration applause. It was deeper, more meaningful, tinged with emotion and real conviction. To family, David concluded, all of us. Exactly as we are, exactly as we're meant to be. And to the courage it takes to love without limits. As glasses clinked around the room, I felt a profound shift in my understanding of what family could be. We hadn't achieved perfect acceptance from everyone, but we had discovered who our real allies were, and that knowledge felt more valuable than universal approval ever could have. As the evening began to wind down and family members started saying their goodbyes, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with everyone in that room. We had all been tested tonight, and those who remained had chosen love over fear, acceptance over judgment. The hugs goodbye were different, warmer, more meaningful, carrying the weight of shared experience and mutual support. David and Elena were among the last to leave, and our goodbye carried the weight of a new beginning rather than an ending. "Thank you," David said as he embraced me, "and I'm sorry how it all went down tonight." "Don't be sorry," I replied. "Tonight showed me who my real family is. That's worth more than avoiding conflict." As I watched the last of the guests leave the country club, I stood alone in the now quiet ballroom, my reflection caught in the darkened windows that overlooked the city lights below. The woman looking back at me was the same one who had arrived hours earlier, but something had changed. Yes, I had lost some family members tonight. Uncle Robert's rejection had hurt in ways I was still processing, and I knew there would be ripple effects from his departure that would impact future family gatherings. The drive home was peaceful, reflective, filled with a complex mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. My phone buzzed with text messages throughout the evening. Family members continuing conversations, expressing support, and making plans that included me as my authentic self. Back in my apartment, as I carefully removed my makeup and changed out of my beautiful dress, I realized that this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything. The beginning of living without hiding, the beginning of relationships based on truth rather than careful omission, the beginning of understanding that real love can survive real challenges. I had walked into that birthday celebration carrying a secret. I walked out as someone free to live openly, completely, surrounded by family who had proven that while love isn't always easy, it can be unconditional when it's real. The woman in my mirror smiled back at me, and for the first time in 38 years, she looked not just peaceful, but genuinely free. Have you ever faced a moment when truth collided with tradition? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of courage, family, and transformation.
The Gender Diary exists to light that path with shared stories. Whether you found connection in this narrative, you're on your own journey of gender exploration, or you're here seeking understanding, your subscription fuels our mission. Every subscriber empowers us to keep illuminating these authentic experiences for our community. Kindly drop a comment below. Your voice adds to the tapestry of experiences that makes this space meaningful. Until our next story unfolds.